Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, I see also many friends here. I'm extremely honored to be in Dubai. It's a beautiful place that has already hosted me quite a few times, and every time has made me feel really at home. So thank you very much for this warm welcome. Well, as it has been said, I am Daniela. I would like to know how many minutes I have at my disposal. I was told 20, it seems to me a lot, so I would like to have a confirmation. Yes, thank you. And I have the honor to lead the Division for Inclusive Social Development at the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in New York. A few words just to give you the context about the division I have the honor to lead is that the division globally for the Department of Economic and Social Affairs works to promote the well-being of people who are belonging, if you wish, to so-called vulnerable groups, that is globally for youth, older persons, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, but as well the family, where all these different generations meet, cooperatives that are social enterprises. And I know that there are quite a few social enterprises present today and tomorrow at the exhibit with whom I had the pleasure to talk, as well as the mandate globally on sport for development and peace. And when it comes just to sport, think of how often we engage in travel to go from A to C, either to practice our swimming abilities or so, or because we want to attend major Olympics or Paralympics or Special Olympics or other events that are very entertaining and extremely inclusive. So in this sense, we should really think of tourism as an incredible tool to promote inclusion. And there are three reasons why I am very much interested, and I do hope to be able to contribute somehow by sharing the knowledge of the United Nations here today. As I said, because of the portfolio I just mentioned to you, because many years ago I used to be a broadcaster, actually, a radio broadcaster as well. Among the many experiences in life I wanted to experiment, life is one, and I really want to enjoy it at its fullest. And I was broadcasting on tourism, and I wanted to make sure that it was a tourism for all. And when I say tourism for all, I do not mean only for persons with disabilities, but actually for everyone who might have a reduced mobility, either temporarily or permanently. So when I say temporarily, I mean, you know, a person who breaks his or her leg. Temporarily, that person has a reduced mobility when traveling. Temporarily, when you have children, small children, it's difficult to engage in travel and tourism and relax unless you find the right services. Temporarily, a woman who is carrying a baby in the last months of pregnancy might have some difficulties in traveling, just taking the plane. So there are many kinds of temporary reduced mobility, and then there are the so-called permanent reduced mobilities. It can be sensory, hearing or seeing, also temporarily actually. You may have an accident and for a while you might not be able to see or to hear. So, but permanent ones like mine, for instance, which I acquired when I was 6 years old, and it hasn't prevented me with my 4 wheels to travel around the various continents. But also, let's keep in mind the people who suffer from allergies that also reduce the ability to travel and to enjoy tourism. Allergies to dust or allergies to food. And what about people who are obese? Also, for those travelers, tourism can become sometimes complicated. So when we think about tourism for all, we should really think about tourism for all. And usually, if we make sure that accessible tourism and transportation are easy in terms of products and services to be accessed by those who have a disability similar to mine, but also cognitive disabilities, we often don't talk about those, or invisible ones. Then, if we make sure that the services and products are accessible to these groups of people, then everyone will enjoy and benefit of those because it comes without saying. So allow me to share with you some information which is related to legal frameworks that exist and that nations like those belonging to the Arab world, but not only, the 193 member states of the United Nations actually have adopted. And when I talk about these legal frameworks, I'm talking about the CRPD, the Convention, thank you, on the rights of persons with disabilities, which has been adopted by 100, almost all countries of members of the United Nations, actually, which is amazing. But we do have also another roadmap to make sure that the rights of persons with disabilities, even when it comes to the travel industry, are taken into consideration. And I'm talking about the 2030 agenda adopted by the United Nations in 2015 with its 17 goals. And those 17 goals are a roadmap. So these are goals that we do hope to be able to achieve, some of them at least, by the year 2030. And for this, we need also the travel industry to contribute and as a turbo accelerate them. So, for instance, SDG 1, Sustainable Development 1, is about poverty. Now, we know that this industry can create lots of employment and lots of jobs. Jobs where persons with disabilities can contribute with their skills and their abilities. So it's not just talking about traveling from one place to the other, but looking at this industry as an industry that actually can create employment, SDG 8. If you are employed, we fight poverty, SDG 1. And therefore, we can reduce the gap of socioeconomic inequalities, SDG 10. And I could go on and on. But one of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that I particularly like, besides SDG 16 that talks about social justice, is SDG 17. And this is exactly what we are doing here today. The Sustainable Development Goal 17 is the one that talks about partnerships and international cooperation. And this is what I'm seeing happening today here. And it's very exciting. So besides these two strategic frameworks I just mentioned, I think it's also very important to give some practical examples. For instance, when it comes to we have heard talking about the tourism, as I said, as one of the largest and fastest growing industries. And I know that there are colleagues present here from the World Tourism Organization, and the World Tourism Organization protects tourism as an experience that has to be sustainable. The tourism sector is an effective driver of economic growth, and we heard earlier on the previous speakers, especially when it comes to the current context, whereby countries are working to recover and build back better. I would prefer to say build forward better, COVID-19. And tourism can really promote inclusive development by enhancing the well-being of communities, not only of persons with disabilities. The potential of the tourism industry can be, however, undermined a lot unless we make sure that the various challenges and limitations that still exist are going to be overcome. And I would like to say that here we are, we are focusing on the approximately 1 billion persons with disabilities, but actually, with those I mentioned earlier on, with the temporary reduced mobility, you can see that the number increases exponentially. And usually, not always, when a person travels, a person with disability travels, it travels for leisure and pleasure, so with friends or family members. And so double that number from 1 billion, it's already about 2 billion people who are traveling. And the reason why we should take care of this huge potential, which is not untackled yet, is also because we have to think about demographic changes in the world as well. The world, with the exception of few areas, is increasingly becoming old. So if we think of demographics, by making tourism and travel accessible to everyone, we are including older persons. And not necessarily, but often when we become old, we might acquire some disabling conditions. So you can see here the market. It's enormous, enormous. And there is such an incredible need. Now, since 2011, I moved to the States. I'm Italian. And so let me give you a couple of examples about the situation in the States, because for policymakers or business makers, it's very important to have data. And I do not think we have enough data yet. So this is an area where we should really start gathering data and analyze data, big data, but also data in the various countries. According to a report prepared by MMGY, which is entitled Portrait of Travelers with Disabilities, Mobility and Accessibility, approximately in the United States of America, and this report was prepared a couple of years ago, I think, there are 12.5 million persons with disabilities who traveled between the year 2018 2019, 18-19. And if we consider as I said, the demographic changes with a growing older population, the so-called baby boomers, then the MMGY estimates the number will nearly triple. That is 33.4 million travelers with disabilities within the United States will move around by the year 2028. So travelers with mobility disabilities spend, at least in the United States, something like 58.2 billion per year by traveling and taking leisure trips, with nearly the same frequency as those who have no disability at all. I'm just giving you this data. It would be interesting if you can collect it in your own countries. However, travelers with this sensory, physical, cognitive, or invisible disabilities experience a range of issues and roadblocks as nearly every stage of the journey. And I tell you that also based on my personal experience. It's quite interesting, depending which airline I take, in which country, even it changes from city to city within the same countries. The rules in that airport or that airline change. And I have to navigate through all these uncharted waters and every time try to figure out a solution. Yes, often persons with disabilities are problem solvers, which is an incredible skill we have to develop, which often is not appreciated. But actually, problem solvers, fast and quick, are very important. So, do states have any obligations? Yes. Yes. The United Nations, as I said, has adopted the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It has been adopted by member states, and member states have the obligation to implement it. And we, as persons with disabilities, have the obligation to take action in a constructive manner, making sure that the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD, recognizes also in the countries where we live that accessibility, be that it is physical, informational. I heard talking about technology, and so assistive technologies, but softwares, and anything that provides information on where we can travel, that information has to be accessible. So please make sure that when you design your softwares and you provide the information, it has to be usable and it has to be accessible. And if we think of Article 9 of CRPD, It sets clear obligations and responsibilities for state parties. It calls for states to take measures to ensure that persons with disabilities have equal access to the physical environment, information, transportation, as well as other public facilities and services. And furthermore, there is Article 30. And it talks about cultural life and recreation, leisure and sport. And it specifies that member states, state parties, have to ensure that persons with disabilities enjoy the access to and benefits of tourist attractions and services. And likewise, as I said, there is also the 2030 Agenda, another legal framework. And if you look at the goal 11, SDG 11, it talks about the principle of making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And this goal captures tourism and recreation through its call for universal design of accessible and sustainable transport systems, inclusive urbanization, and access to green and public spaces. Therefore, please keep in mind, CRPD has been ratified. The 2030 Agenda is there. We have to make sure that accessibility has to be translated and become a central element of sustainable tourism and sustainable development policies. So I plead here to policymakers to take into consideration to create policies at national level for them then to make rights a possibility to become operational, and to the private sector, which at times moves faster than the public sector, to work in synergy with the public sector and share your internal policies as well, and make sure that in your internal policies, public sector, you also adopt CRPD and the 2030 Agenda. Our Secretary General at the United Nations also took action, because also the UN, as the house of 193 countries, has to demonstrate that it is implementing the concept of accessibility. So the Secretary General has launched in 2019 the United Nations Disability Inclusive Strategy, so that being the world, most of the world in the UN, then the world from the UN out and from out in demonstrates that accessibility has to be there and no one has to be left behind. Lots of work needs to be done. The UN offers the space. You are offering the space in Dubai. Let's keep sharing this information and work at multilateral level together for a better world for everyone. Thank you so much.